Hello and welcome to today's Ask the Gardener here on Facebook and also of course on LinkedIn and YouTube, where I do my best to answer your gardening questions every Friday at 1 o'clock live. And all I ask of you in return is if you enjoy them or if I get to any of your questions, please do like the video, share it, tag it in the comments below, anything, and that will help the video get out there, make more people aware of this service that we do every Friday, totally free of charge. Now it's the 22nd of July today, and it's a big difference from this time last week. That intense heat has gone and died back to a more typical, I suppose, Irish summer's day. And when, you know what, when we see what's happening in with our neighbours over in the UK and all across Europe, I don't think I'll ever criticise the Irish climate again. Long may it remain as benevolent as it is. Now, in a while, of course, I'll be joined once more by Colman up in Kildare, organic grower and organic fitness expert Colman Power. He's going to be talking about successional sowing. Try saying that a few times quickly later on this evening and so here you get on. So I'll be chatting with Colman about that in a while. First of all, I want to go straight to questions, and there's a few in from during the week and since last week's show. So I want to deal with one of them first. And Elaine sent in this one. Elaine Barmer. How to trim back a pyracantha hedge encroaching on a flower bed, and when, please? Well, Elaine, it's a gorgeous hedge actually, the pyracantha hedge. For anybody who doesn't know it, it's got these lovely white flowers in spring and early summer, loved by the bees and loved by the pollinators, which of course is very, very important. And then these flowers turn into berries later in the year. So during the winter it's a great plant, particularly for the blackbirds. They love the pyracantha berries. Brilliant too, I suppose you know if you have one, but if you don't know, it's a brilliant security hedge because nobody is getting through a pyracantha hedge because of those long thorns. The best security hedge you'll get, believe me. But in terms of cutting it back, because it is quite a vigorous grower, it's a good evergreen plant too, of course. Cut it back. It flowers earlier in the year, as I say, normally kind of April, May time. So it's kind of, you have a fine line here. You don't want to prune it too hard because you'll remove the berries, right? And you don't want to cut it too early and too hard because you'll remove the flowers and thus you'll have no berries. Now, if you do that, you're not going to harm the hedge, but better off not to sacrifice the flowers and berries. So actually your time to do it is now, but just be careful when you're cutting it back that you're only cutting back this year's growth, because if you go in too hard, as I say, you will cut off the berries. You're not going to harm the plant, as I say, but you will cut off the berries. So cut it back now, but just not too hard. So hopefully that helps you, Elaine. Anytime after flowering, really. But so that's kind of May, anytime after the end of May, let's say, to end of July. Mary has sent in a question during the week. Mary Attridge, I love nasturtium. Will they come back the following year, or do you have to get new plants? And that comment came in response to a post I put up during the week. I wrote an article last weekend for the Irish Examiner on nasturtiums and how they're a fantastic plant. Not just visually, they're fabulous to look at, but also they bring such health benefits in terms of herbal remedies. Now, as I said in the article, don't go using them without getting medical advice or qualified medical herbalist advice. But they draw in the pollinators. They're all parts of the plant are edible, but also they're a great companion plant. They work as a control plant, which we can talk more to Colman in a while, but a lot of people grow them next to, if they might be growing edible plants like cabbages, broccoli, things like that. If you plant nasturtium near them, the nasturtiums will attract the caterpillars to the nasturtium so that they're not eating your brassicas. A great companion plant, as I say. What more can a companion do than nearly sacrifice its life for you? But brilliant plant. But to answer your question, Mary, sorry, I will go off on a tangent. So to answer your question, each plant, no, it doesn't come back each year because it's an annual. But if you plant nasturtiums once, you will always have nasturtiums because they set seed so freely. They germinate so quickly and so freely. You'll have a plethora of nasturtiums for years to come in all the different colours, yellows, oranges and reds. But the plant itself won't come back, each individual, but you'll always have more coming. So hopefully that answers that for you, Mary. Should I keep cosmos? This is coming in from Rita. Should I keep cosmos, which are in a pot, fairly dry or fairly moist? Thanks for the help. Well, you're welcome, Rita, for the help. And anything like that, any summer flowering plant like cosmos or any of them that are growing in pots at this time of the year, I would always err on the side of overwatering, because if they're getting too much water, it'll quite simply drain away through the drainage holes in the pot, okay? So I wouldn't be too worried about it. And it's been so warm and so dry, really. You know, I know there's a couple of days rain forecast this weekend, but it has been so warm and dry. I would err on the side of overwatering, because if you underwater them, they'll wilt, and you'll have plenty of time to fix them. But every time they go under that bit of stress, it affects them a bit. So to get the best out of them, give them a bit too much water, I'd say. Josephine is asking me, what's the right time to plant roses out of pots and into the ground? Well, Josephine, when you're putting something from a pot into the ground, be it a rose or any plant, there's no root disturbance as such. You're not damaging the root system. So you can do that any time of the year. That's like nowadays, obviously, nearly all plants are grown that you get in garden centres are grown in pots, so that you can plant them nearly 12 months of the year. Traditionally, plants before the onset of plastic pots in modern day garden centres, everything were grown in nurseries. And that's where it comes from. You know, you should only plant during a month with the R in the name. And it's not true that you should only plant in one of those months, but it's actually that something can only come out of the ground in one of those months. So it's only between kind of October, November and February, March that you can lift something out of the ground and transplant it. But if it's been grown in a pot, you can plant it any time of the year. Plant it now, by all means, just do pay attention to watering. And of course, I mentioned this very briefly at the end of last week, but watering is a big challenge for new plants during this time of the year. One way you can counteract that is when you plant new plants, put a good healthy mulch around the base of it. And it could be bark mulch, it could be your own homemade compost, any organic material just around the base of the plant, because plants will lose water, be it the rose that you're talking about planting or anything that has been planted in the last 12 months. They will lose water in two ways. Number one, via transpiration through the plant, they're losing the water through the leaves, but also through evaporation. Okay, from the soil around the root zone. So we can reduce the amount of water lost by evaporation by just putting more organic material around that root zone to slow the rate of evaporation. So if you're planting your rose now, good idea to give it a mulch with some good rich organic material, okay? Now, I'll be joining Colman in a minute. Organic grower and organic fitness expert Colman up in Kildare. I'll be joining him in a second. We're talking about successful successional sowing. A bit of a mouthful, as I said. If you have a question for Colman, get it in now, and I'll be going up to him in a minute. There's one or two more there coming up that I'll get to first. Now, one is here. Just bear with me while I scroll back up. Paula's asking me, I have calla lilies this year, every year. I have calla lilies this year. Every year they are beautiful. This year they just didn't come. What happened, do you think? Hard to say, Paula. I would say with the calla, the most likely scenario, if they didn't come at all. So if it's just that they didn't flower, I would say maybe give it time. They could flower yet and give them a shot of a good quality tomato food. So don't lose heart if they haven't flowered. But if it's just that they haven't come up at all, well, I suspect it could be the amount of moisture in the soil, particularly this winter. The winter wet is something that they don't really like. They like a good sunny position, but if it got too wet, I'd say that's probably the most likely scenario, that they may be rotted in the ground over the winter. So perhaps that's the answer. I do like to grow them in pots because it's free draining soil, and a lot of them can be a bit frost tender. Now, we didn't really get any low temperatures worth talking about this winter, but they can be frost tender, but in particular the winter wet, that does bother them. Now, I'm going to move straight over to Colman if he's with us and if he can hear me up in Kildare. Now, here we go. Colman, how are you? Can you hear me? I can see you okay. Maybe stand a bit closer to the microphone if you could. Just, you're a bit faint, that's all. Brilliant, thanks. So Colman's going to be talking to us all, guys, about successful successional planting. And I, for one, am looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. If you have a question for him, and in fact, before I let Colman start, there is a question which has come in from him, which I'm going to bring up there now. And it's from Buddy's garden. Buddy being the puppy. I grew potatoes in bags, and once I had, Colman, hopefully you can hear this. I know I tagged you in the question there earlier, so you might have seen it. I grew potatoes in bags, and once I had harvested them, I tipped out the compost, sieved it, added more of my own compost in layers, and then replanted. One bag now has beetroot, another has carrots, and a third has a few sunflowers as I'm running out of space. Well, I understand that. Is there any need to sieve the compost base if using, sorry, just bring it down here, sorry. If using grow bags, or is it dependent on the choice of the crop? The huge, juicy worms which I found went straight back into the soil where they came from. Thank you both. Well, you're very welcome. And Colman, I might throw that question over to you.
Yeah, well, I reply to that comment, and we're going to expand on it here for the rest of the viewers on this live here today. So if you are, I suppose, using the likes of grow bags and you're thinking of, I suppose, sieving your soil, it's something that I wouldn't recommend, just due to the fact that it's an extra job that you don't necessarily have to do, because there may be, I suppose, particles that you will be taking out of it, and inclusive of that, some stones and beneficial microorganisms, and those are definitely the worms that I would be talking about as well. So don't, I suppose, there's enough jobs to be doing in midsummer, most certainly, and if you could do what I incorporate in some more compost that gives more nutrients to it. So if you ever take out a plant, always remember that to put back in some more nutrients. If you've taken out potatoes, adding in some, I suppose, of your own compost is the best thing you can possibly do. And making your own compost is something that we can talk about in a separate maybe video, and mixing your greens and browns material and then adding that back in so that you can put in another crop. And as you said, and the individual has touched on, there are worms in it, and that's a great indication for people wondering, what should I suppose, or should I get my soil tested, or how good is my soil? If you inevitably have worms in it, that is a great indication. Why? Because worms do not stick around in SH1T soil. They are looking for those, I suppose, material that is in the soil, so they can feed on and then give us back benefits, aerating the soil. They most certainly then allow the plants to thrive and breaking down other material that otherwise wouldn't have had the opportunity to be released to the plants. So what has been done there is there has been a planting of your potatoes. The potatoes have been taken out, and beetroot has been sown in on top of that. And how that and why I do recommend that, we can touch on that right here, right now, is due to successional sowing. Thinking ahead of time, planning what crops you have in your veg patch, and as soon as something is out, that most certainly something can be planted directly back in there. Because one thing you do not want is to have the likes of something bare and barren in the likes of your veg patch or your polytunnel. Because why? It's an opportunity for you to harvest and grow a successful crop. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit about here. And these are the trays that I do recommend. These are 77 cell trays. You can get smaller ones and you can get cheaper ones, but I'm recommending the gold standard, okay? So these are trays that you most certainly can get from Fruit Hill Farm. They're based down in Bantry. I have no affiliation with them, but most certainly these are the best. If you were to hold them, and I use these with the courses, the Grow Your Own courses I do here in Kildare, and when people come, they get one of these trays going home, and they're going to last you for life. So if you've ever, I suppose, used the cheaper versions of them, which are absolutely fine for starting off, but remember, what you pay for is what you get, and this is something that's durable. It won't break on you, definitely, and will last you a considerably much longer time than the other cheaper versions. And it's very easy to know when. Often people ask me, when is it time to transplant your cells or your cells of whatever you've sown? Most certainly when they're coming out and bursting out the end of your trays. So that is one of the things that I'm going to talk about here today. So I suppose for the ease of today, I'm going to talk about an organic fitness food. So these are your microgreens. So microgreens, again, are something that you can harvest very, very easily, and are going to be using them, the reusable yogurts. Okay, yogurts are very important because they're actually good for your gut health. They're a natural probiotic. So these are organic yogurts. Keep it Irish, lads. And I'm going to show you exactly how to successionally sow microgreens and get a harvest in less than 14, or roughly about 14 days, especially at this moment in time in the likes of your summer. So we're going with the likes of our compost that I do recommend. It is Classman. Again, it's a good quality compost, and if you've ever used, I suppose, this compost, you will know the difference in relation. As soon as you start to touch it, you will feel how soft and how fluffy it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill up one of these cups here right now with our compost, Classman compost, and after that, we will be doing our first sowing. It's simple. Fill up your yogurt tub, and if you wanted, you can cut the yogurt tub in half, reducing the amount of compost that you use. For the ease of this video, I will certainly will be showing you just as quickly as I can. These are organic, okay, red radish seeds. Again, I got these from Fruit Hill Farm and are something that are very easily sown. Just to sprinkle of these on, and I'll show you the spacing that I recommend. Pretty much covering the whole entire top of your yogurt tub, and as a result of that, then we just have a little bit of a sprinkle to cover over your red radish. And red radishes are from the brassica family, and they are related to the superfood broccoli. And as I said, broccoli is something that can take a huge, I suppose, amount of time to firstly get a successful crop due to the fact of that cabbage white butterfly. It causes a bit of an issue. So with these, can be grown on a warm windowsill, and if watered most certainly every day, especially midsummer, it is something that gets the likes of a iron-filled, fiber-filled, antioxidant rich food such as these delicious red radish. You most certainly do the taste test here and say you cannot taste better than that and get fresher. It will be more sustainable and growing a little bit of your own food. So whatever your growing space, you can get microgreens in 14 days. Very, very simple. Peter, have you ever grown your own microgreens?
Do you know, I have grown my own microgreens. Yeah, I haven't for a few years now, but I must get back into it because they are fabulous. I do like them with a sandwich. But come here, Colman, just a quick one for you there. That's perfect now. I mean, that shows you how you can grow your own kind of superfood even on a kitchen windowsill. But what about for those who might have a raised bed and they might have, let's say, harvested their early spuds and they don't have mains coming on or anything like that, and they have space within that raised bed now, or maybe it's not raised bed, but just their vegetable plot. What would you recommend sowing now then to go in there for maybe harvesting later this year or early next year or during the winter? How do people get best use out of their veg plots right now?
Well, most certainly then that it leads me on to going back to your trays and sowing, I suppose, quick return crops such as either your spinach or your rainbow chard. And I do recommend the two of these, I suppose, for foods for people growing a little bit of their own, because they're most certainly something that's very pest and disease resistant. They're from the same family as beetroot, and then they are high in that iron, their magnesium and vitamin C. And as a result of that, within again roughly about 14 days, you will most certainly have your seeds germinating from the likes of trays. We don't have to have this tray, remember. You can also start them off in egg cartons for whatever suppose you have for sowing your seeds in, or they could be direct sown. The reason why I do recommend transplanting is due to the fact that you may have issues with slugs, and I have come into, I suppose, issues with wood lice. So most certainly know what way you can get a successful crop, and I do recommend the likes of those, rainbow chard, or I have my perpetual spinach, which is a great variety of spinach because it's broad-leafed. Again, it's in the same family as the likes of rainbow chard. Okay, but I do prefer your rainbow chard. Why? Because it has darker colors. Darker colors are higher antioxidants. And the third one I do recommend would be your, definitely maybe some turnips. And there are not Milan turnips and white turnips, which I do recommend people to grow. Why? Because they have such a quick germination, quick turnaround, quick, or I suppose, harvest, and better bang for your buck than, I suppose, sowing several other different crops.
So Colman, if people were sowing turnips, parsnips, kind of that, but what you're talking about there now, either directly into the raised bed or, as you say, into cells and transplanting them, how quickly would they expect to harvest?
You can get in 2 months red radishes with this direct heat wave that we're currently having at this moment in time. So within 2 months, you could have your own, I suppose, red radishes up on your plate for either breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
And then, of course, it's at that point it's time again then to put something else in for the winter months, or maybe spring cabbage. Would you put in at that point, or?
Yeah, you certainly could. But I do recommend people coming in towards later, coming closer to, I suppose, Christmas, to put the beds to rest. Because just like ourselves, there is a period of time where we do need to take rest. And a lot of people may have not heard of it before. It's, I suppose, a technique of covering with farm manure and then either using cardboard or some type of covering so that the bed can, and all the beneficial microorganisms and worms can do their work. We can plant into a weed-free bed come winter. And that's something that a lot of people are not doing. They're not giving their beds a chance to rest, and then their soil is knackered come spring, and then they have more problems with pests and diseases. So it's, I suppose, important to give the soil a bit of a rest every now and again, because it has been food up until before Christmas with whatever crops you have sown in it.
So once again, it's all about keeping the soil healthy and paying attention to the soil. Would you use a green manure? Would you sow a green manure on the beds? Or would you prefer just the farmyard manure or seaweed and cardboard on top? Or?
I would have a preference towards seaweed and the likes of farmyard manure. Definitely the seaweed, because it's like a micronutrient. There's 21 different micronutrients. And with the, I suppose, cover crop, it's something that is an extra added job, maybe trimming it down. But it's not to say that I don't recommend that. And it would be something that I would, if someone had a direct question, they've tried the likes of the seaweed last year, would you go with cover crop? Yes, if you've done it the previous year, you could have got so many benefits from the seaweed, and then maybe a nitrogen boost with into that legume type
with the
of
green manure. Yeah, very good. Okay, so keep alternating it. Colman, you don't mind staying with us for a minute? There's a couple of other questions there I want to get to, but I'm going to come back to you in a sec. Thanks, Colman. Now, Maria has a question in. Maria's asking, my potted magnolia little gem in ericaceous soil fed with yellow sulphur.
All right, Peter's mic seems to have gone as a result right there. So we'll just talk a little bit about more what things are to be done in the likes of the garden at this moment in time. So with, I suppose, tomatoes in full flush, we had a couple of people mentioning how to ripen them. And I definitely do recommend even removing the leaves. And it may seem counterintuitive as of right now. So remember that what does the plant do to make food for itself? And it needs photosynthesis, and that is made in the leaves. However, to suppose ripen those tomatoes, we have to remove the leaves up past the likes of the fruit, because that ends up sending the nutrients directly from the roots, where all the minerals and vitamins are taken from the soil, to those tomatoes. And there are definitely things that I do recommend, slightly reducing that water so that you inevitably can most certainly get a quicker crop of your tomatoes. And for everyone that's known a little bit about growing their own and has ever tasted a tomato, they're so completely different to what you get in the likes of the shops. And it's really key that people, I suppose, start growing a little bit of their own and sampling and getting people that are not growing their own to sample. And I suppose what inevitably I do recommend to people as well is if they have either family members or friends that are growing the same sowing different varieties of tomatoes, so you can most certainly taste and swap. I love that little bit of a bartering, and the things we suppose have got a little bit away from connection, community of growing more foods. And those are the things that I'm currently doing myself. I'm removing in the likes of the polytunnel that's just above me right here, just behind me, all the different tomatoes that are in there. And it's something that I'll be showing people more tomorrow on that Grow Your Own course. So tomatoes, pruning the likes of those leaves up past the likes of the fruit. And it may seem counterintuitive, but definitely do it, and let me know how you get on when you are after pruning off, get a better crop on your tomatoes.
Colman, thanks for that. Hopefully my microphone is back and you can hear me again, and I'm going to get straight back to those questions before we finish up. Thanks, Colman. Just wait there for 1 sec. So Maria, I'm not sure how much of it you heard, but you were talking about your magnolia, and I was saying it's the aspect. It's if your magnolia is facing east or south, the sun is too harsh, and that's why your flowers are opening up brown. So I would move it ideally to somewhere where it's getting dappled sunlight and shade, maybe west facing, maybe even north facing. Okay. There's a question there about sunflowers. How often do I water sunflowers? Could I overwater them? I would say the short answer to that is no, not at this time of the year, not with the heat we're having. I'm watering mine every single day at the moment. I have a good layer of mulch around them to retain moisture around the root zones as well, but I am watering them every day. So I don't think you could really overwater them at the moment. Ashley is saying, I would love to hear more about making good compost. Well, Ashley, we will. I'll deal with that with Colman within the next few weeks. We'll do a bit on it. But glad to hear you're enjoying it, and glad to hear you're would like to hear more about compost. And if anyone else watching would like any topics covered, certainly send it in, and we'll have a look at it. And also, please do feel free to share the video, like it, etc. Tag anyone you want. Now, I'm going to go back to Colman there for 1 minute. I just want to remind you as well that next week I'm actually being rude enough to go off on holiday, so we won't have an Ask the Gardener next week, but the week after we'll be back as normal. Later today, I'll be on, if you're watching it live today, Friday the 22nd, I'll be on with Ray Darcy on Radio 1 from about 3:30. So if I didn't get to your question today, email ray@rte.ie and we'll deal with the gardening question then. So just before that, I want to go back to Colman. Colman, I didn't hear what you were saying. I was rushing around trying to fix my mic. You have a course coming up tomorrow, is it?
I have a course coming up tomorrow, yeah, and I suppose it's about showing people exactly what has to be done at this time of year, and maybe a couple of other different techniques. Someone was talking about ripening tomatoes, and we mentioned this on previous lives, but it's definitely growing, I suppose, a variety that ripens a little bit quicker, but also definitely removing the light of the leaves on it right now, stressing the plant so that it can, I suppose, send its energy directly into the fruits, so you can get a speedy harvest of your crop.
Good man. I was thinking of you yesterday. I was staking some of my own tomatoes, which had kind of fallen over with the weight of the foliage more than the fruit, I'd say. And I was saying, God, if Colman sees these now, I'd be in big trouble. But anyway, they're up and they're tied and they're all doing well. So hopefully we'll be enjoying fresh tomatoes later in the season. I'm hearing great feedback from everyone who's done the courses. Congratulations. Good luck with tomorrow's one. We won't be joining you next Friday. As I said, I'll be off of my holidays. So the following week, hopefully Colman and myself will have a chat again. And I just want to have a quick look there, see if there's any more questions. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put on a little video here because there's an awful lot of questions that have been coming into me recently about what are the right plants to use for bees and pollinators. I'm delighted to see there's such interest in it because it's such an important area. So I'm just going to leave you with a little clip. It's a piece I did with Dahi earlier this year about what are the right plants to use for bees. And as I say, join me with Ray Darcy later on at 3:30, and if you have a question or there's anything you'd like us to cover, put it in the comments and we'll do our best to get to it over the next few weeks. Till then, thanks. Just the honeybee. We kind of, a lot of people tend to think of bees and they think just honey,
yeah.
right? But honey are actually farmed bees and they're not under threat, they're fine. And whilst they're important in the garden and to the gardeners, they're actually, if you like, too efficient. They're excellent at collecting the pollen and bringing it back to, and the nectar and back to the hive, where we want the kind of solitary bees. There's, as I say, 99 species. Unfortunately, over a third of them are seriously endangered.
The bees that do all the hard work for us, and without them, we mightn't have any food.
Well, we wouldn't
have any food.
We would be at the end of it.
Okay.
Like if it's that tapestry, and if you know what happens if you start pulling the threads out of the tapestry, which is what's happening at the moment. The whole thing falls apart.
We don't want to frighten anyone, Peter.
No.
At this point as well. So what can we do, I suppose?
Correct. I suppose we have to be a small bit frightened because it is happening. So you look at the statistic that we're witnessing the quickest rate of species extinction that we've seen in 400 million years, right? So you hear that and you go, wow, God, yeah, I'm powerless to affect change, but we're not. That's the good news. Each one of us can do something to help those bees. And if we start helping the bee, well, then the tapestry starts repairing itself. So yeah, there is good news. We can, but we as individuals
It's not too late. That's the good news.
No, and as well, it can't be. We have to accept that it can't be, and we have to do something, and we can do something. And it's not hard work; it's an enjoyable job, you know.
But the honeybee's okay, you said.
The honeybee is okay. No, their numbers. I'm not an expert on honeybees, but their numbers with the varroa mite and things like that are, I think, in trouble. But with the solitary bees and the bees that we rely on, habitat destruction, overuse of pesticides in the garden, things like this are affecting them, okay? And they're the ones that are inefficient collectors, if you like. So they're our friends in the garden in that they'll fly into one flower, they'll collect the nectar and pollen, and they'll lose half of it in the next flower, which is exactly what we want to pollinate the plants.
Okay.
They're the ones we need to mind.
Okay.
And we can do that in our own garden. I'm not talking about putting in a beehive. I'm talking about just creating...
Yeah, so we want to get the bees into the garden so the garden will work properly.
Correct, because it's all, as I say, part of that tapestry. So yeah, we're helping the bees and then they help us.
Yeah. So how do we get them in there? That's the next thing.
By using pollinator-friendly plants is the term, but plants that will appeal to bees. So flowers that bees like are very, very simple flowers, like what you'll see here in these vases in front of me. So very, very intricate and intensely hybridized flowers may as well be useless to bees. We're looking at simple flowers.
Yeah. And what are they? What are the simple flowers that will get
Well,
them
if you look at some of these simple ones here, like you've Bidens and things like that, so you've lots of simple flowers that the bees will feed on because the pollen and the nectar is very accessible.
Yeah, and you can even see the pollen in some of them there.
You can, absolutely. Look, and the simplest of all, of course, are the wildflowers. So you can put in wildflowers, and we've all heard about the importance of wildflowers. And allowing areas to go wild, okay?
Now, when you say go wild, That doesn't mean unattended.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Okay.
It's not an excuse for the hubby to say I'm putting away the lawnmower for the next 6 months.
That's Peter Dowdall said it on the Today Show.
That's it, yeah.
Leave it alone.
But in fact, it is a bit like that. But there's several ways of looking at this. So yes, rewilding. And I think this is particularly important in public spaces, obviously where health and safety isn't an issue, that areas just be left to go wild. And you'll be amazed, like people say, how do I install a wildflower meadow? Well, if you have an area of land like that, just stop cutting it and let the species re-emerge.
You don't have to set anything or sow anything at all, just leave it go.
Just leave it go, depending, every area would be a bit different now, but just let it go. And you'll be amazed. There's an organisation in the Northern Ireland called Don't Mow, Let It Grow, which do just that for public areas.
Okay.
And they're now species-rich meadows without having done anything really. Now you do have a small bit of maintenance in the autumn months.
Just like something like this.
Like a meadow like that, like a wildflower meadow like
it seems there that somebody went cutting silage and left a small bit to grow wild. Is that what happened down there?
Yes, and that's very valuable, like creating these pollinator corridors. And if we can do it from farm to farm, and there are many farmers out there who are really bought into this sustainability and protecting the pollinators, and we need to see more of that, but also domestic homeowners. Now, when you look at domestic homeowners, it can be a bit different because even in my own garden, while I'll espouse the virtues of rewilding and all that, I don't want my own garden to be unkempt. I want a bit of cut grass. So it's all about doing it in an environmentally sound way. You can have your cut grass, your lawn area, and you can have your pretty beds, but just make sure that the plants that you are using in there aren't intensively hybridized and that they are beneficial and helpful to the bee population.
And Peter.